Welcome to Pieces for My Puzzle. I am your host, Nikki Ship, and I'm excited to be sharing with you my life with a son on the spectrum. This podcast is for anyone who is looking for quick tips and perspective, but most of all, for hope and inspiration. So sit back, relax, and let's put the pieces together. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Pieces for My Puzzle. My name is Nikki Ship, and I'm going to be your puzzle master for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Last week, we spoke about food aversions and gave some quick tips on how you can help your kids get some good nutrition. This week, I am really excited to be having a guest speaker on the show. Please welcome Dani Shaw from Dani Shaw Coaching. Welcome to the show, Dani.
Thank you so much for having me, Nikki. I'm so excited to be here and looking forward to this for a long time.
Me too. I'm very, very excited. Let me tell you a little bit about Dani, and I am going to put my glasses on and read a little bit about Dani because they have such a beautiful history. I don't want to botch it. So I'm going to put on my glasses here. A little bit about Dani. So Dani is really on a mission to support kids in developing positive pathways early in their lives for a confident future. She has over 10 years of experience in special education and as a teacher in elementary schools. And through her own personal struggles and self-doubt and life experiences and a whole combination of things, she's realized that kids today are in need of a different type of education, an education in belief systems, in self-confidence, and most importantly, in self-love. So her goal is to empower kids to recognize their innate value and power with which influences their lives. So once again, Dani, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'll just jump right in. So tell me a little bit about how you got into special education.
Yeah, so that's actually kind of a funny story. My mom is kind of the influence in that, oddly enough. I had just graduated from high school and I was going into college. I grew up knowing that I wanted to be a teacher. I've always loved kids and had a passion for kids. And so being a teacher was kind of just a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was going into school, I was originally going into school up at Northern Arizona University.
Okay.
And my plans kind of changed last minute. But as I was looking into going into elementary education. And at the time, NAU was offering a dual major program with elementary education and special education.
Okay.
And so my mom kind of was hearing about that as we were getting all the initial info about school. And she's like, you should really look into that. And I was like, Mom, I have zero interest in special ed. I will never teach special ed. That is no, thank you. Totally intended on teaching elementary. And so I was like, at the time, it was just one extra semester of school, and my mom was like, just really consider this. Like, you're going to be super marketable if you do it. You don't necessarily have to teach it, but it will be good to have on your resume and things like that. And so I kind of caved, and I was like, okay, fine. It's one extra semester.
Gotta love parents.
Exactly, right? Which ended up being like the biggest blessing and benefit to me. And so I took that route, and I dual majored in elementary and special education in my undergrad. And kind of through that experience, I ended up working in an elementary school as a instructional aide. And at first I was a one-on-one for a girl who had muscular dystrophy.
Okay.
She was in the regular education classroom and just needed kind of more of that physical support. And kind of a couple months into school, she fell ill and was in the hospital and was out for quite a time.
Oh my.
And so being as I was funded through the district through special education, I ended up working in a self-contained classroom on campus. And it was in that classroom where I met my mentor in teaching, Sarah Davis.
Okay.
And she really kind of groomed me and taught me really all the things that I know about special ed, and just working in her classroom and being in school at the same time. Really kind of created that passion and that love for kids in special ed and with disabilities. And so I continued from there and graduated. And I took a little hiatus and went and lived in Ecuador and came back in October. And at the time, special ed jobs were all that were available. And so I started teaching here in Arizona at a school in Tempe, working with kids actually on the spectrum. So,
Awesome. So you've worked with all types of kids that are special needs related, not just kids on the spectrum, right?
Yeah. So my degrees are in mild to moderate disabilities, and in my 10 years now, I've worked anywhere from self-contained programs that are specifically with kids with communication and sensory-based needs. And since then, I've gone on to teach in resource settings, and I currently teach in Utah, actually, where I'm living and based right now. And I'm teaching students that have really, really severe learning disabilities, along with other disabilities as well. Some kids on the spectrum here and there,
Right.
but just a lot of mild, moderate disability.
And would you agree that there's a lot of secondary type of diagnoses, so to speak, that come with special needs kids? So, for example, it's not just like Drayson's not just autistic. He's dyslexic. He has dysgraphia, dyscalculia. So, do you find that to be that's always kind of a given with kids that are in the special needs realm?
I think it really just depends. It's so individualized,
Right.
I think that you do see that can be fairly common, where it's not just one specific need or area in that way. And in special education, really, the ultimate goal is to get those resources for those kids, right?
Right.
And so being able to just identify at least one area, and giving that focus, but then recognizing that every kid is different, and there might be additional needs to support along that way. So yeah, I think it's just really individualized.
It's not all a one size fits all.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about. I'm so excited about this, by the way, because Dani has done something really extraordinary and has created Dani Shaw Coaching, which I'm really, really excited about this concept, because I think it is so important, not just for the special needs community, for the autistic community, but for people in general. And so I have to ask you a little bit about how Dani Shaw Coaching got started, and a little bit about what it's about. Like, what's the mission of Dani Shaw Coaching?
Yeah. So that, I'll answer that second question first, actually. So the mission is to support kids in developing positive pathways early so that they have a confident future. And when I say pathways, I'm actually referring to the neural pathways in your mind. Okay. And so really kind of how this all came about was back in 2020. I kind of went through my own experience and kind of struggle, and was really struggling with thoughts and doubts about myself, of these feelings that, so many of us experience, even as adults, right? Of I'm not good enough, the things I do don't matter, just not feeling like enough. And I was working with my own life coach at the time, and really working to kind of reframe and debunk some of these beliefs that I had developed about myself over the course of my entire life.
Right.
And it was in the midst of all of these tools and things that I was learning from my coach. At the same time, I was teaching fourth grade in the special education class. I work in an inclusion classroom, and so I was co-teaching with a general education teacher. And like I said, in the midst of 2020 pandemic, my district was teaching completely remote and completely online. And so we had just a wonderful group of little fourth graders that we were working with virtually. And I think it was interesting to see that I knew that there were these struggles and these things before the pandemic, but it got infinitely highlighted, right?
Yeah.
When your world is completely turned upside down, you have to navigate and figure out a new way to teach and deliver instruction and all of these things. And I really saw within a few of my students the same exact beliefs that I struggled with as a fourth grader, and that in that moment I was working to process through and work past to figure out, how can I change and shift this so that it's not impacting my life in a negative way and holding me back. And so I kind of just made that connection just kind of through my own learning and kind of self-discoveries, and just listening to podcasts. I was like, the things that I'm learning right now as an adult and trying to unlearn are the exact same things that kids need right now. And how cool would that be to teach them now, young as kids, where they don't have all of these pathways that are firmly rooted and developed in beliefs, that they're starting to formulate, right? But they're not concrete and solidified like they might be for you or I, right?
Right.
And so I thought about it of like, how cool would it be to create basically like an intervention program?
Wow.
We hear so much about that in special education and in schools and things like that, but there isn't an intervention program for belief systems and self-confidence and developing self-love and knowing tools of how I can navigate my thoughts and how I am not my thoughts.
Especially, and especially in education.
Right.
That's not written. I mean, I taught in higher education for better half of a decade myself, and none of that's written on, human compassion or emotional intelligence or, trying to identify a way to open up a student or to, empower them. None of that is written. It's usually just, here's the outline.
Here's the curriculum.
Here's the curriculum. This is what you have to do.
Right.
So,
and I think it's really important to highlight too, especially now, and I think we're seeing a lot more since the pandemic, that need for that social emotional learning,
yes.
right? And that's just, unfortunately, one more thing that's being piled on to our plates as teachers. It's like, you have to teach the standards and you have to teach this and all the benchmarks and all the testing and all the things, right? Oh, and also,
can you make
teach
sure
this
they're
as
also
well.
emotionally
Right.
Let's get them emotionally stable too on top of it. Why not?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I can see why that's been such a struggle, and I have seen that over the years myself with teachers that I've worked with Dreesen, that struggle where there's, I feel like there's a limited capability of what they can do, but they know something more needs to be done, and they're just not sure what to do or how to make that happen.
Right.
And then I think too, there's that fear of saying it, so it's never really said. So then you're kind of left to wonder as a parent, and really. I never really thought much in the very beginning of Dreesen's, he's still in the beginning of his educational career. He's in elementary school. But when he was in kindergarten and first grade and second grade, it didn't necessarily occur to me about his emotional health. It didn't necessarily occur to me that, that he might need to have some more confidence, or I don't know if he can identify that he feels different than the other kids because he can't communicate that. So I feel like we've had to kind of peel away those layers a little bit, and we still are. So I think that it's so important that you're bringing this subject to light because it is important. One of my previous podcast episodes that we talked about autistic burnout in adults and how that can happen. And so I truly believe that some of the work that you're doing is helping to avoid that potential when they get into an older age.
Exactly.
And so what age range do you typically work with? Have you worked with all sorts of kids? I mean, I know you said you work with fourth graders, but you've worked with all sorts of kids, or?
Yeah, so when I developed my program and kind of my curriculum, if you will, I was really honing in and targeted kind of what I know, right? Kind of fourth grade, 9, 10 years old. And it's funny, actually, when I launched just at the beginning of this year, I gained a client who was 6 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing to see, the types of emotional struggles and other factors that kids today, no matter really what age and how young, that's actually starting with, these feelings of worry and anxiety and not knowing how to identify those emotions and how to be emotionally literate, right? And just recognizing that need, kind of like you were saying, of, starting that younger, giving the kids the tools that they need to be able to build upon, right? Giving them that foundation to start, and knowing really who they are, at their core, to be able to help differentiate, oh, these are just thoughts that I'm having.
Right.
Knowing how to process and work through those thoughts, right? And not taking on what is not actually true of who they are at their cores, at the core of the human being, right? And being able to provide them those tools to navigate those things as they get older. Again, earlier on. Right? That early intervention is so key in so many factors, right?
Yeah.
And it, like I said, it just that click of, I don't want kids today to struggle with the beliefs that I've struggled with my whole life. And
Right.
there's no need for it now.
Right.
Right? Because there is a way and there are tools, right? We just have to have that space and that understanding and that openness to be able to learn that even as adults, right? But then also knowing like it's amazing to see kids are sponges, right? They soak in so much information, and it's so beautiful to see these concepts that as an adult I get tripped up on, right? And that I struggle with and I, try to navigate, but kids are like, yeah, duh, simple.
Yeah.
And it's really amazing to see that. And I think so much about how this undoing and that I've been working on in my own life, right? And it's like, instead of undoing, let's just set you off on the right trajectory to begin with. And not to say that you're not going to struggle, right? They're going to have hardships. They're going to have hard times. The world in which we're living in is hard and hard for these kids of navigating so many, constant inputs and factors and things. But providing them that sense of safety and security. Of
giving them those coping mechanisms of what they need.
Exactly,
Exactly.
Yeah. That's the goal.
Wow. So tell me a little bit. Have you found that it's difficult for parents to know what to do to help their child?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that, at least from my experience and what I've seen in my educational career, I've taught in Title I schools my entire career. So working with a lot of families that are coming from different backgrounds, low socioeconomic statuses, who are really just doing their very best, right?
Right.
They want to learn and they want the best for their kids. But at times, and even regardless of your status, right, not knowing what to do, right? Not knowing where to go to find the resources even at times, I think has been really hard. And again, just with what the world has become with social media and this, the pandemic and amplifying this, this need for connection and, being able to process and navigate, feelings and emotions, having that, again, emotional literacy, even for me, and I know for my parents, it's kind of that generational, cycle and give down. But I think that, parents are really struggling. But I also think that there's a lot of empathy and compassion in that they're doing the very best that they can.
Right.
And the more that we start to talk about, feelings, emotions, being able to identify those things, communicating ways to share that in healthy ways is going to get us further. I remember listening to a podcast once that I heard emotional intelligence is actually more important than intellectual, right? Your IQ. Not to say that's not important. It's a factor. But if you think about it in the world that we live in and as human beings in interacting, right? It's being able to look, eye to eye and to say, speak clearly, to identify those emotions and to hold conversations and building relationships, right?
And to communicate your wants and your needs. And absolutely.
And so I think that parents are struggling with that right now. And I think even just a general acceptance of knowing where we're at to start there. And then that willingness, like I said, to being able to learn and being open to different ways to then be able to teach that to our kids, I think is really important.
Is there something that you can think of that, and I don't even know how to formulate this question, I guess, really properly, but like, a jumping off point or something that you notice that they need help with to get them to start looking for resources or help for their kids, and even for, creating that emotional confidence that their child needs, and maybe even within themselves. Like, is there a piece of, like, I guess, advice that you would offer of, like, here's where a good jumping off point would be? Does that kind of make sense? I don't even know if I'm formulating my question right, but
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, like, we have to be able to start within ourselves. I think that is number one, like, super basis there. Is starting within yourself, right? Kind of recognizing maybe where you're at with some things, maybe things that you might be struggling with or have struggled with in the past. And just being accepting and open with that, and knowing that you're a human being, right? And that's okay too. I think from there, something that I am really big on in talking a lot with my clients and their parents and things like that, their parents love their kids.
Yeah,
and that is clear, right? That's never a question. But I think one of the biggest things that is so important to start instilling in our children, and even just basically saying at the very fundamental level, what do you think is the most important thing you could ever say to Drayson?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm a talker, so I don't know if it could be one thing. Just that I love him. I love him unconditionally. I'm always there for him no matter what. I will always be there for him.
Yeah.
I think is the biggest message and to know that he's loved and that it doesn't matter who he is. I'm getting emotional, guys. It doesn't matter who he is. It doesn't matter autistic or not. I wouldn't love him any less. In fact, I can't imagine him not being autistic. Like, I used to go through these periods where I felt kind of like, why can't he just be like every other kid? Oh my gosh, I'm crying, folks. I would get into these moments where I was like, why can't he just be like every other kid? And now I kind of admire him because he's in his own kind of world and there's no sugarcoating with him. What you see is what you get. If he doesn't like you, he's going to let you know. And I'm kind of like, that's kind of a cool thing that you can just be like that, But I guess my biggest message to him would be that I love him no matter what. It doesn't matter. I don't care about all of these other. I feel like there's a lot of societal norms that are in place that I just choose not to believe in anymore.
Yeah.
So.
And that's a beautiful message to send to your kid, and that is super important, right?
Yeah.
But I'm even going to go a little step further and say that's not the most important message you could ever say to Drayson.
Okay.
The most important thing that you could ever say to Drayson is, I believe in you.
Yeah.
And thinking about that message and what that sends to him, right?
Yeah.
And this concept and this ability of, I believe in you.
Yeah.
Right? I believe in you, in your abilities, things that you might have to work a little bit harder to overcome, right? And I think something that is so important too, if we're just kind of honing in and speaking directly to the special needs community,
right,
is that your child doesn't have a disability.
Right.
Right? And I am so acutely aware of language and words, right? Especially being in this field for so long. There are certain labels and things that just, it gets my blood flowing. But I think that it's really important to be aware of the language and the words that we're using to label, identify all of these things because they make an impact, right? And it's not that Drayson is disabled, not able to, right?
Right.
It's that he has a different ability, right?
Right.
He has a different ability. He has a different way of achieving, or doing something that you or I would do, right?
Yeah.
And it's neither right nor wrong,
Right.
And being able to instill that I believe in you in anything, right? I feel like we hear this concept of like you can do anything you set your mind to, right?
Right.
And it's like, but do we actually understand what that means?
What it means,
right?
yeah.
You can literally do anything you set your mind to, right? And by starting and creating that belief system, that pathway in your mind of I believe in you, no matter what it is, no matter what challenges you may face, no matter the good, the bad, the ugly, the sad, right?
Yeah.
I believe in you.
It's interesting that you say that because my very first podcast episode is called It Starts with Belief. And I talk about how you have to have the belief in your child and then also in yourself.
Yep.
But now I'm trying to think of a time of if I've actually verbally said that to him. Like I've walked the walk, but have I said to him, I know I've said you can do it. I know I've said all the standard things like you're saying, like you can do anything you want to do.
Those are all good things,
right? But I don't know. I don't know if I've said that. I'm going to go home today and tell him I believe in him. That's what I'm going to do. But it's interesting that you say that because I've always held that. I just don't know if and then here we go. Look, talk about emotional intelligence and having that form of communication. I don't know if that's something that I've communicated clearly. So and it's interesting.
I would be interested to hear like what that outcome is, and even doing that over time, right?
Yeah.
The more that I have said that to my own students, I believe in you.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so simple, but it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And what that instills in them of like, well, if somebody, my mom, right? If
Yeah.
my mom believes in me, right?
Right.
I believe in me. And even having our kids practice and say that, I believe in me,
Right.
right? And what that does to their subconscious and
Right.
what that is starting to develop in their minds, it's
Right.
life-changing. It's amazing.
Wow, I think we could all use some confidence coaching. So, so what messages? What's a message you'd like to leave with for parents and their kids? Is there a message that you would like to convey to our audience about this type of learning more about communication on an emotional intelligence level?
Yeah. I think the message that I would want to leave most to parents is to start there and saying,
Right.
I believe
I
in
believe
you.
in you.
Right. And then I also think something that has really influenced me and what I've learned from my mentors, specifically in the education field, is to have high expectations, right? I think so often
Yeah.
we categorize and we see, oh, this kid has a disability, right? Disabled, not able to, and then that bar kind of starts to get lower and lower, right? No.
Yeah.
We have to keep that expectation at the same height as we would any other neurotypical child, right? And when we do that, and I know this from experience, right? And in the kids that I've worked with over the last 10 years and what I've seen in that is that when we set our expectations high,
Right.
they will rise to them
Yeah.
every single time without fail. Now, that's not to say that are they going to go from point A to point B directly? No, because we know that they have a different ability. They do
Right.
it differently, and that's okay.
Right.
And honoring that that's okay.
Right.
And that it can look different. And
Right.
it's okay for it to look different. And then kind of building what that looks like for them to be able to. But I think that is so essential for parents and for anybody that might be working with your child, a therapist, their teacher, whomever it might be.
Yeah.
It's so essential to have that high expectation.
Yeah.
And when we have that high expectation of kids, then they do rise to that, right? It normalizes in some ways, right?
Yeah, and I think that's been really hard for my husband and I. We've always set like kind of higher expectations, and initially, even a couple years ago, Drayson's educational team that we worked with, that was the hardest part, and I almost felt like Drayson could sense that they didn't really believe in him, and so the pushback was even worse or more because it was like, yeah, it was just so like, this is a goal. It was, there was like no emotion behind it. And I realized that, curriculum, academics is different. And so there tends to always be that divide. And I remember one time even in an IEP meeting, I even said, like, I need a team that's going to believe in my son. I remember saying that so vividly and feeling very upset when I left because this might all look great on paper, but I didn't feel like that the belief that I needed them to have in him was there. And I almost wondered that's why he kind of struggled for a little while until, he's in a great place now. We found a great home for him, educational home for him. But I'm just saying, I realized that, all these things you're saying to me, it's like I'm kind of having these epiphany moments right now, like, oh, yeah, that's why there was so much pushback on that. Oh, yeah, that's why that wasn't working well. And so I think you deliver such a great message to not just parents, but educators and, special needs community as a whole. I think you deliver such a great message. And I am so excited for you with Dani Shaw Coaching because I think you're going to do so many amazing things. I am so excited.
Thank you.
So I am going to post in the show notes how you can get in touch with Dani, but you can also go to danishawcoaching.com. And I'll post her the rest of her information in the show notes. So if you would like to get in touch with Dani, I know she would also love to speak with you as well. And, sometimes I think the biggest step is getting over our fear. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. Don't be afraid maybe to reach out and talk to Dani and get some perspective and see how it can maybe help you and your kiddo. So this is kind of concluding the end of our episode, but I do like to tell a story at the end of every episode. So I'm going to enlighten you with a story about Drayson. So we like to do a story highlight at the end of every episode, kind of highlighting those celebratory moments where we see, good things happen with our kids, right? So I'm going to tell you kind of a story a little bit in relation to what our topic's about today. I'm going to talk to you a story about Drayson's confidence when I realized he was a little bit more confident than I realized about certain things. One of the things I do with Drayson actually is mirror work. And so sometimes when he's getting ready in the morning for school, I will, help him get ready with his day, and I'll go into the bathroom while he's combing his hair, and I'll get behind him, and I look at him in the mirror. So he's looking at my reflection, I'm looking at his. And I would say things to him, and I would make him repeat the words back to me. So I told him one day, sweetheart, you are so smart. And he'd say, smart. And I say, sweetheart, you are so kind. And he would say, kind. And I said, sweetheart, you are so funny. And he would say, funny. And I say, sweetheart, you are so wonderful to be around, and you are so handsome. And he said, I know. So
I love that.
I felt like my job was done.
I love that.
So it was kind of a cute little private moment that I got to have with Drayson, and it really just made my heart grow 3 times the size. So if you have a story that you would like to share, please write in the show, and you can email us at info@piecesformypuzzle.com. I would love to read your story on our podcast, and we'll let you know too if we're going to read that on one of our upcoming podcasts. But thank you so much for tuning in, and please like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and feel free to subscribe to us on our YouTube channel at Pieces for My Puzzle. If you like what you're hearing, please spread the word to others so that we can help spread more awareness and support to the autism community. And feel free to give us a good rating on your preferred podcast platform that you use. And that concludes our episode for today. So until next time, keep working on your puzzle. And remember, you don't have to have it all solved in a day. Take care.